Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
On my 39th birthday, my mother handed me a $10 gift card to Chili's across the dinner table. No envelope, no bow, just the stiff little plastic rectangle pressed between her fingers, like a receipt she forgot to toss. She didn't look me in the eye when she gave it to me, just sort of slid it over while asking if I could pass the butter. I said thank you because I always do, because I've been trained, like a damn Labrador, to wag my tail even when I'm being kicked. Exactly 5 minutes later, she reached into her purse again, this time smiling wide, full of theater, and pulled out a small envelope with floral trim. She handed it to my sister, Emily, with two hands like it was some sacred offering. "For you, sweetheart," she said, as if the world was finally giving Emily what she deserved. Emily peeled it open slowly, milking the moment like a child unwrapping Christmas morning. Inside were 2 plane tickets to Europe, Barcelona and Rome, business class, complete with hotel reservations and a little printed itinerary that my mom had clearly spent hours crafting. "You've earned a break," she told her, "after everything you've been through." And just like that, something inside me, I don't know what to call it, shifted, not snapped. Snapping would mean I made a scene, cried, screamed, slammed silverware. No. What I felt was colder, quieter. It was like a steel door slammed shut somewhere deep inside me, sealing off whatever pieces of myself still gave a damn. I smiled politely. I cut a piece of ham. I chewed. And in that same quiet, polite voice, I said, "By the way, I'm taking a sabbatical too." They all turned to look at me mid-bite. "Because I just sold my startup," I said, "for $3.2 million. The fork dropped from Emily's hand and hit her plate with a sharp metallic clang. My mother's face went pale, and for once in my life, the room belonged to me. But let's rewind a bit. This wasn't the first time I got a $10 gift. Hell, it wasn't even the cheapest. On my 26th birthday, I got a clearance mug from Kohl's with a chipped handle. On my 30th, she texted me, "Happy birthday, sweetheart, let's do dinner soon," and then ghosted me for 6 weeks. Meanwhile, Emily got a surprise brunch party with custom cupcakes and a rose gold watch. "She's going through a lot," Mom would say. "She needs the support right now." Apparently, Emily has been going through a lot for the past 30 years. Every failed relationship, every bounced rent check, every time she quit another job because she just didn't feel seen. Our mom treated it like a national emergency. Emily got to spiral, while I was told to be patient, to be understanding, to let her have her moment. I used to wonder if I was crazy, if maybe I was too sensitive. I'd tell myself it wasn't favoritism, just different needs. That line's been my lifeline since I was old enough to realize Emily's tears weighed more than my achievements. I got straight A's? Well, of course you did. Emily passed a class? Let's take her out to celebrate. I worked 2 jobs in college and never called home for help. Emily racked up credit card debt studying astrology in Bali and got a bailout and a hug. I learned to stop hoping for applause. I learned to clap for myself. The worst part? I was never jealous of her. Not really. I didn't want the mess. I just wanted my damn mother to see me. To look at me the way she looked at Emily when she showed up late to dinner and said something half-baked about discovering her true path in sound therapy. I wanted her to ask about my job without looking confused. I wanted her to ask how I was really doing. Not if I'd met someone yet, not if I was still doing that computer stuff. When I started my tech company, I didn't tell anyone. Not out of secrecy, but because I knew what would happen. I knew Mom would say it sounded risky, that she'd ask why I couldn't just get a normal job like my cousin in accounting. So I built it in silence. Nights, weekends, lunch breaks. I took client calls in my car and sketched out wireframes in the margins of old notebooks. I failed 3 times before it worked. But when it finally did, I didn't scream it from the rooftops. I just kept going, because no one was watching anyway. That night, sitting at that dinner table, everything finally came into focus. The $10 gift card wasn't just lazy, it was a summary, a closing statement. My mother saw me as low maintenance, not in the way that's admirable, in the way that means you don't need to be thought about. I was the one who didn't ask for much, so she gave me less, over and over, for years. And as Emily giggled over European cities she couldn't pronounce, and Mom beamed like she'd saved a soul, I realized something painful and liberating at the same time. I would never get from her what I had spent my entire life quietly hoping for. So I let the quiet do the work for me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't beg to be seen. I just waited for a lull in conversation, took a sip of my wine, and said, "Actually, I've got something I wanted to share too." All eyes turned, and I smiled the kind of smile you practice in the mirror for years without realizing. That's when I said it. And for the first time in my life, I watched the world tilt in my direction. Just a little, just enough, and I wasn't done yet. The thing no one tells you about being the dependable one, the quiet achiever, the so-called rock of the family, is that eventually people stop looking at you altogether. You don't get praised. You don't get comforted. You don't even get noticed. You just become a piece of furniture, sturdy, predictable, necessary, but never admired. I spent most of my life in that invisible role, smiling when I didn't want to, helping when I was exhausted, swallowing disappointment so deep it lodged in my bones like lead. And the worst part is, it wasn't always like that. At least not obviously. When we were kids, Emily and I weren't that different. She was louder, sure. She had that reckless energy that people mistake for charm, in small doses and chaos when it's constant. I was quieter, more curious, the one who liked puzzles and science kits, and writing little stories that I never showed anyone. At first, it didn't feel like a competition, but by the time I was 10, it was clear that Emily's drama had more currency than my calm. She cried when she lost a game. She got candy. I won the spelling bee. Mom didn't even come. "I had to work," she said. "Besides, I knew you'd win." That sentence stayed with me longer than any applause ever could. It sounded like a compliment, but it wasn't. It was a dismissal dressed up in flattery. That pattern never changed. If I succeeded, it was expected. If Emily stumbled, it was a crisis. Mom would light candles, make tea, stroke her hair like she was a wounded bird. She'd say things like, "You're so sensitive, you feel everything so deeply," and then tell me I was strong in that voice that meant cold, detached, not worth fussing over. By high school, I stopped showing her my report cards. I didn't tell her when I got into the advanced science program or when I was accepted into a college out of state with a partial scholarship. She was too busy managing Emily's heartbreak over a boy she dated for 3 weeks. I remember packing up my dorm supplies in the back of my used Honda, while Emily sobbed on the porch about how unfair life was because her boss didn't respect her art. Mom hovered over her with a box of tissues. She didn't even walk me to my car. I didn't cry about it. I didn't throw a fit. I got in the car, drove to college, and built a life for myself. I graduated early, got a job at a small marketing firm, and paid off my loans within 5 years. No one asked me how I did it. Emily, meanwhile, bounced from idea to idea like a pinball. For a while, she was a doula, then a fashion blogger. Then she managed an open mic bar for 3 months before falling in love with a DJ and moving to Arizona. Each time she failed, Mom acted like it was some noble journey. "She's figuring it out," she'd say with a proud little smile, like Emily's messiness was proof of her authenticity. And what was I? Just the boring sister, the one who didn't need help, the one who handled things. That night at the birthday dinner, sitting under the soft yellow lights of our mother's perfectly set dining room, all of those memories pressed down on me like an invisible weight. I could hear Emily's laugh echoing off the walls as she told some long-winded story about the time she almost got cast in a reality show in Los Angeles. Mom leaned in like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever heard. My father sat there quietly, as usual, occasionally nodding, occasionally clearing his throat, but never stepping in. He's always been that way, kind but absent in the emotional sense. He notices more than he admits, but he rarely intervenes. I caught him glancing at me once or twice, but he said nothing. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe he knew and just didn't want to light the match. When Mom gave Emily those tickets to Europe, her words were so soft and affectionate, I felt like I was watching a Hallmark movie. "You've earned a break," she said, "after all you've been through." She said it with such tenderness I could have screamed. What exactly had Emily been through? A breakup? A failed art installation? A retreat that didn't align with her soul's purpose? Meanwhile, I had been surviving layoffs, building a company from scratch, skipping vacations for 5 years straight, and not once had anyone told me I'd earned anything. I didn't even get a thank you when I fixed Mom's Wi-Fi last month. It's a strange feeling, sitting in a room full of people and realizing no one really sees you. Not as a person, not fully. They see what they want to see. They see the role you play in their story. Emily's story was about struggle and redemption. Mine was about competence. No arc, no applause. Just reliable, silent function. I was a tool in their narrative, not a protagonist in my own. That realization should have made me angry, and maybe it did, somewhere deep down. But in that moment, it just made me tired. So when I said I had something to share, it wasn't revenge. It wasn't even pettiness. It was something simpler, a reclamation, a declaration. For once, I wanted the room to tilt in my direction. Not because I was yelling, not because I was falling apart, but because I had done something real. Something hard, something they couldn't ignore. The silence after my announcement stretched thin, like a string about to snap. Emily blinked 3 times like she misheard me. My mother's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. My father looked down at his plate and let out a small, barely audible breath. I picked up my wine glass, swirled it slowly, and smiled again. Not smug, not vengeful, just calm, in control. After all these years, it was the only thing I truly owned, and I wasn't going to give it away. Not this time. It wasn't just the silence that followed my announcement. It was the kind of stillness that sinks into a room like a cold fog, thick and slow, crawling across every surface until everyone at the table is choking on it, but no one has the courage to say so. My words, so simple, so precise, had shattered whatever scripted family performance we were supposed to deliver that night. My mother sat rigid, her jaw ever so slightly clenched, as if she was holding in something that couldn't quite fit in her mouth. Emily, for once, was quiet. Her fingers still hovered above her wine glass, and her mouth was slightly open in confusion, or maybe disbelief, as though the very idea of me having anything significant to say or achieve had short-circuited her entire understanding of the family hierarchy. I didn't gloat. That's the part people don't understand about moments like this. When you've spent your entire life being underestimated, ignored, or quietly dismissed, finally getting the upper hand doesn't come with fireworks or shouting. It comes with restraint, with power in your posture, with the decision not to over-explain. So I didn't. I simply sipped my wine, set my glass down gently, and let the weight of my words marinate in their stunned silence. $3.2 million. That wasn't just a number, it was a message, a recalibration. It wasn't about the money, although, let's be honest, the number didn't hurt. It was about the fact that I had done something significant without anyone's permission, approval, or even acknowledgement. I had created something from nothing. I had poured every ounce of myself, every late night, every anxious breakdown, every damn time I ate dinner over my laptop, into building something real. And I had done it while they were too busy fussing over Emily's latest artistic rebirth to even notice. My mother recovered first, of course. She always did. She blinked, reached for her napkin, dabbed at the corners of her mouth even though she hadn't eaten in 5 minutes, and said in a tone that was meant to sound casual but carried a distinct tremor underneath, "Why didn't you tell us?" That question, that stupid, hollow question, why didn't I tell them? Because every time I opened my mouth to share something meaningful, it was met with either indifference or skepticism. Because when I told my mother 5 years ago that I wanted to start my own company, she laughed and said, "Are you sure that's a good idea? Tech is so unstable. Wouldn't it be better to just find a secure job?" Because she never asked about my business beyond surface-level questions she barely understood. Because she had no curiosity about my life, unless it could be compared unfavorably to Emily's. I looked at her and smiled again. Not with kindness, not with cruelty, but with the measured calm of someone who knows they finally have the upper hand. "Would it have mattered?" I asked, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. "Would you have even believed me?" Emily finally spoke then. Her voice was brittle, defensive, sharp in a way that reminded me of every fight we had as teenagers, when she would twist my words and then play victim the moment I raised my voice. "I mean, $3 million? That's a lot. How did you even... What, just wake up and decide to be rich?" I could have taken the bait. I could have listed every unpaid invoice I chased, every pitch I bombed before I got it right, every moment of self-doubt that I smothered with another hour of work. I could have explained the algorithms I built, the partnerships I negotiated, the time I poured into building something scalable. But I didn't, because she wouldn't understand, and more importantly, she didn't want to understand. She wanted to poke holes in it. She wanted to reduce it to luck or some fleeting trend, because the alternative, acknowledging my competence, would unbalance the fragile pedestal she'd been perched on her whole life. "I didn't wake up rich," I said evenly. "I woke up every day for 7 years and worked while no one was looking." My father coughed lightly and reached for his water, the sound a faint signal of support, or maybe discomfort. It was always hard to tell with him. He wasn't a bad man, just afraid of confrontation. He liked peace, even if it was fake. I caught his eyes for a second. There was something there, respect maybe, or regret. I didn't dwell on it. Mom tried again, this time leaning into the diplomatic tone she used when trying to smooth things over. "Well, of course we're proud of you," she said, but the words landed flat, like she was reading from a script she hadn't prepared for. "That's a huge accomplishment, sweetheart. We had no idea." I wasn't interested in her performance. Not anymore. So I nodded politely, picked up my fork, and started eating again, like I hadn't just dropped a truth bomb into the middle of her curated little dinner party. I let her squirm in her discomfort, let her replay every moment she dismissed me as if it had only just occurred to her that I might have been worth paying attention to all along. Emily sat stiffly now, arms crossed, staring at the tablecloth as if it had betrayed her. The Europe tickets were still beside her plate, a visible reminder of the narrative that had suddenly cracked open at the seams. She had spent years being the main character, the emotional centerpiece, the one whose life was always more interesting, more urgent, more deserving of attention. And now, in the space of a single sentence, I had rewritten the script. I watched her stew in it, and I felt nothing, not joy, not guilt, just clarity. This was the cost of silence. This was what happened when you let other people write your story and then dared to take the pen back. The dinner limped on after that, with forced conversation and brittle laughter, but it didn't matter. The shift had already happened. I had said my piece. I had taken up space, and I wasn't finished yet. By the time dessert came out, an overbaked lemon cake that my mother insisted was from scratch, just like Grandma used to make, the tension in the room had coagulated into something thick and unspoken, hanging between us in heavy slices of unacknowledged discomfort. No one was making eye contact anymore. The usual familial rhythm, that strange dance of subtle barbs and exaggerated praise that had been our dysfunctional norm for as long as I could remember, had disintegrated under the weight of a single truth I had finally spoken aloud. And still, not one of them asked the most obvious question. What now? I watched my sister pick at the edge of her plate, her once animated demeanor now deflated into quiet resentment. Her eyes never quite met mine, but I could see the thoughts racing behind them. She was trying to calculate how she had missed this, how the sister she had dismissed as boring and risk-averse had pulled off something that, by all accounts, should have belonged to her. Emily had always positioned herself as the visionary, the free spirit, the one with big energy and a creative soul, as my mother often called it. She believed, somewhere deep down and likely unchallenged, that the universe owed her a breakthrough, that one day someone would recognize her light and pour resources into her personal brand of chaos. So for her, my quiet, consistent grind was not just uninteresting, it was invisible. And the fact that it had yielded something as tangible and undeniable as millions of dollars wasn't just surprising. It was a betrayal of the narrative she had wrapped herself in for decades. My mother, ever the image curator, tried once again to bring things back into her control. She placed her fork down with deliberate care, folded her napkin into a tiny, trembling square, and leaned across the table as if physical proximity could mask the emotional chasm that had opened up between us. "Lauren, I just want to say," she began, voice delicate like she was offering condolences at a funeral, "that I'm truly, genuinely proud of you. I think it's just taken us all by surprise." I studied her face for a moment, trying to detect sincerity beneath the brittle civility, but I found only that same reflexive damage control she had mastered over years of managing Emily's blow-ups and deflecting accountability with vague reassurances. There was no actual curiosity in her eyes, no urge to know what I had done or how I had done it, only a desperate scrambling to reshape the situation into something less threatening. Because in her world, emotional equilibrium was everything, even if it meant ignoring truth. "So, what are you going to do now?" she asked cautiously, her tone too even, too rehearsed. That was the moment I knew she wasn't asking out of interest. She was asking to regain control. If she could frame my success as a temporary moment, something she could neatly file into a category like Lauren's lucky break, or that one time Lauren surprised us all, then she wouldn't have to confront what it really meant. That for years she had favored volatility over stability, performance over substance, fantasy over fact. That she had built an entire familial structure around the belief that Emily needed more, deserved more, because she was fragile and special and full of potential that just needed nurturing, and that I, being the capable one, would take care of myself quietly in the corner. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to remember this. Her face, the faint panic beneath the smile, Emily's narrowed eyes, my father's awkward stillness, the entire illusion crumbling slowly around us. I wanted to burn this into my memory, not for vengeance, but for clarity. "I think I'm going to disappear for a while," I said finally, keeping my voice calm and measured. "Take some time, rest, see the world like Emily's doing. Except this time, I won't need anyone to book the tickets for me." The silence that followed was different than before. It wasn't shocked. It was something closer to stunned acceptance, like a courtroom after the verdict has been read. Emily flinched slightly, her jaw tightening, and my mother looked like she had swallowed something sour. My father, to his credit, didn't try to cover it with a joke. He just looked at me, really looked, and for a flicker of a second, I thought he might say something that mattered, but he didn't. He nodded once, slowly, and looked down at his plate. There was no apology, no grand gesture, no reckoning, just that quiet, desperate energy of people trying to tape together a broken mirror without acknowledging the shards. Emily broke first. "Well, good for you," she muttered, pushing her chair back. "Must be nice to take a break just because you feel like it." It was petty and transparent, and I almost laughed. Because for years, that was the role she had played. Taking breaks not because she needed them, but because life was always too overwhelming for someone who never followed through on anything. I had never resented her breaks. I had resented that no one questioned them, that my mother treated her exhaustion like an emergency, and mine like a sign I was doing something wrong. I could have responded with something equally sharp, could have reminded her that I had earned this rest through years of effort no one acknowledged, but I didn't. Instead, I stood up, placed my napkin gently beside my plate, and said, "Yeah, it is nice. No yelling, no chaos, just truth. delivered simply with the weight of everything I had carried and the clarity of someone who had finally decided to stop asking for recognition and just take what she had earned. I didn't stay for coffee. I didn't wait for anyone to hug me or ask me to stay. I walked out with my head high and my heart calm, knowing that I had just burned down the lie that had kept me small for too long. I didn't need them to clap. I didn't need their approval. I had my freedom. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. There's a strange kind of clarity that follows a rupture like the one that took place at my birthday dinner. A sense that the world has not so much changed as it has finally been stripped of all its decoration and excuses, leaving only the bare truth of things behind. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, the sky streaked with pale gray and lavender as the sun began to retreat behind the hills, I didn't feel triumphant the way some people might imagine. There was no swell of victory music playing in my head, no overwhelming feeling of having won something. Instead, what I felt was something quieter, heavier, and more permanent. The stillness that follows a long, exhausting war that you never actually signed up to fight, but ended up winning simply by refusing to surrender. I sat in my car for a while before starting the engine, letting my hands rest on the steering wheel, motionless, as the last fragments of conversation echoed in my ears. My mother's brittle reassurances, Emily's sharp, envious comment disguised as a passive jab, my father's quiet nothingness, which somehow hurt the most because it suggested that he might have seen everything but chosen, again and again, to stay out of it. I don't know what I had expected when I told them about the sale of my startup. Maybe not celebration, but at least a pause. A recognition, a simple moment of genuine attention directed at me without filters or reluctance. But what I received instead was a mixture of disbelief, defensiveness, and an almost immediate attempt to minimize it or place it into some neat little box where it couldn't threaten the roles we had all been playing for so long. As I drove away, the quiet hum of the tires against the pavement was the only sound that felt honest. I didn't have a destination in mind. At least not that night. I wasn't ready to go home, not yet. I needed distance, a buffer zone of silence and space to remind myself that I was no longer bound by that house or the dynamics inside it. I had spent so many years contorting myself to fit into the space they had left for me, to meet their expectations, to play the version of Lauren they were most comfortable with. But that version had always been an edited draft, stripped of ambition, devoid of desire, built to serve other people's egos rather than exist on its own terms. For a long time, I had believed that if I just kept my head down, worked hard, and proved myself, they would eventually come around. I thought there was a finish line somewhere, a moment when they would say, "We see you now, we're proud of you, we were wrong." But the truth I finally faced that night was that some people don't change, not because they can't, but because they don't feel they need to. My mother had spent decades believing she was fair and generous and loving, even as she repeatedly prioritized Emily's needs, crises, and emotions over mine. Emily had built her identity around being the one who mattered most, who needed the most, and therefore deserved the most. And that story didn't leave room for someone like me to be celebrated, because the moment I was seen, it cast her in a dimmer light. I stopped at a lookout point on the edge of town, a place I hadn't visited since high school, back when I used to drive there just to think, to escape the noise at home, to imagine a life that felt bigger and freer than the one I was being handed. I parked, stepped out, and leaned on the rail overlooking the valley. Below me, the city stretched out like a sleeping animal, lights flickering on one by one, a patchwork of lives unfolding in their own tangled ways. And for the first time in years, I felt something unburdened rise up in me. Not joy exactly, and not relief, but a release, as though I had finally stopped holding my breath. I pulled out my phone and opened the airline app. I didn't know where I would go yet, Europe maybe, or Iceland, or somewhere farther, somewhere that didn't carry the weight of my family's history. I scrolled through flights without urgency, letting the possibilities unfold like pages in a book I hadn't yet decided how to read. I wasn't running away, and I wasn't chasing anything either. I was simply choosing myself, maybe for the first time. I had spent so long living in reaction to others, trying to avoid conflict, to earn approval, to not be a burden, that I had forgotten what it felt like to move through the world on my own terms. There was a part of me that wondered if my mother would call the next day, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain, maybe to pretend the night hadn't happened at all. But deep down, I knew better. She wouldn't call. Or if she did, it would be brief, evasive, performative. Emily might send a sarcastic text, or maybe a passive-aggressive social media post about people flexing their money like it proves anything. My father might say nothing at all. That was the nature of our family. Not explosive, not openly cruel, but slow-burning in its neglect, precise in its emotional hierarchy, always maintaining just enough politeness to avoid reckoning with the truth. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not the favoritism itself, but the fact that it was always denied, always wrapped in soft language and plausible deniability, leaving me to question whether I was imagining things. But now, after what I had said, after what I had finally allowed myself to feel and voice and act upon, there was no going back into that fog of polite silence. I knew that some people watching from the outside would hear this story and think I had delivered the perfect revenge, that I had waited for the right moment, dropped the news like a grenade, and walked away victorious. But that's not how it felt. Revenge implies malice. What I did was something different. It was reclamation. It was refusing to shrink. It was choosing, quietly and without apology, to live my life without waiting for permission. As the wind picked up slightly and the sky deepened into twilight, I stood there and realized that the moment I left that dinner table, I hadn't just left a meal or an awkward family gathering. I had left an entire structure behind. A house of mirrors built to make me doubt my worth, to reflect back only the parts of me that were useful, compliant, manageable. And now, with nothing but sky and road ahead of me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough.